On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around. We've just wrapped up with Darren from Network Global Solutions, and now I'm joined by Dr. John Hopkins from Swinburne University in Melbourne. Thanks, John, for joining me.
Great to be here.
John, tell me a little bit about your background in logistics, supply chain especially, and how long you've been with Swinburne.
Yeah, so my background goes way back.
Yeah.
So I left school when I was 16 and did a mechanical engineering apprenticeship with a company called, they're now called Delphi, where AC Delco at the time, and they work in the automotive space. I ended up working in a warehouse as part of the rotation, looking at quality control, goods inwards, and the rest, as they say, is magic from there.
Yeah.
But in terms of Swinburne, I leaped over into academia maybe about 12 to 15 years ago from industry, and I've been at Swinburne for 6.
Fantastic. And with Swinburne's got a great range of supply chain programs and courses. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, first of all, we have a Bachelor of Business major, so that major is in supply chain and logistics management, and we also have a brand new kind of course. We just had our first graduates just before Christmas, and that's the Master of Supply Chain Innovation.
Yeah.
And the motivation for that was supply chains are changing so much, and we wanted to really kind of disrupt the market, if you like, and give students skills for the future.
Yeah.
So rather than studying a traditional type of supply chain management course that maybe their boss had also studied 10 years before and it being pretty much the same, we wanted to give them new skills and look towards the future, focus on things that they'll need, and not only knowledge but skills that they can apply today.
Absolutely. I think the technology part and the data analytics of supply chain now, even as recently as 5 years ago, we weren't sort of dabbling in really. Now that's just it's going like a snowball, just gathering so much momentum.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. One of the subjects in our Master of Supply Chain Innovation is big data analytics, and another very important part of the course is that each of the subjects we actually partner with an industry partner.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and they help us to co-design and co-deliver in some cases the units.
Yeah.
So they give us a real feel for what's happening, and for that particular subject, our industry partner is Tableau.
Yeah.
So we get the latest release of all their software. The students get to work on Tableau, learn about it, have a project based on Tableau. And then in their final semester, we also have other industry partners, Coca-Cola, Amatil, and Seva Logistics.
Yeah.
And the students get to work on a final year applied project with those companies. And quite often they involve data. And luckily for us, both Coca-Cola, Amatil, and Seva both use Tableau. So it's fantastic for our students to be able to learn those skills and then be able to apply it in a real project, in a real world environment.
Yeah, I think that industry integration or interaction is really powerful for students learning, especially supply chain, because as you said, it's evolved so dramatically over the last few years. What are there any sort of key takeaways, John, that you've seen, sort of the major shifts? I mean, we talked about data, but what are the other things that have major shifts in supply chain that you've noticed?
Yeah, look, I'll start by saying, we're living in a very fascinating time at the moment, and if we were talking 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would only be talking about data-driven supply chains, digitalization of the supply chain, which is obviously still important, and that's the way we're going, and the advance in robotics and automation. But I think in light of what's happening with the coronavirus, and we're looking back again at things like risk management and how robust we are, how we can react, how agile we are. So it's really mixing the old and the new. So the new stuff is great, and that we need that to take us forward. But I think hopefully when the situation is contained and we can kind of get back to some level of normality, we need to kind of go back and redress some of those basics.
Absolutely. I think that's what I've noticed over the last month and a bit with all this supply chain bottlenecks around the coronavirus and China and the transportation with shipping lines and so forth, is that people are forced now to rethink their supply chain, re-educate themselves on supply chain, because as you said, many of the decision makers in business, especially SMEs, they've struggled to stay up to date as it was, and now when there's sort of other extra hurdles coming to the supply chain pipeline or milestones, you have to rethink your stock levels, your inventory management, you have to rethink your cash flow is a major part of it. Even your fulfillment and delivery to your end customers. That whole model starts to not crumble, but you got to start to rethink that to protect the risk.
Completely, yeah. And from a risk perspective, you need to have those contingencies. We never want to use contingencies, but now is the time. Then, hey, we're going to have to. So, how strong are they? What can we learn from this? What could we do better next time?
Sure. Now, with your students, are they pretty much people straight out of high school or other things, or do you get a lot of mature age students as well coming through Swinburne?
Yeah, so with the master's course specifically, we have a real diverse mixture. So in terms of nationality, as well in terms of background, some may come straight from a bachelor's, particularly overseas student, but most of the local students will generally be working full-time, studying part-time. They want that qualification to take them to the next step in their career, they tend to be, maybe mid to late 30s on average. It's very difficult to say because they are quite a diverse range. Predominantly male, unfortunately. That's something that we would like to change. It's just a reflection on the industry, unfortunately. So if there are any female students interested in joining Swinburne, we would love to welcome you. For undergrad, that's completely different. So it tends to be school leavers, predominantly local. I think it's about 60% local students, and they may have a part-time job. Some will work full-time and study part-time, but the vast majority of them will study full-time and maybe have a part-time job. Sure.
And I know that there's a lot of great things that Swinburne are doing with Professor Nico Adams with Factories of the Future, Industry 4.0, as you said about automation, robotics. Are there things that, where do you see, I mean, no one can really answer this without a crystal ball, but where do you see supply chain heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, wow. That is a tricky one. Definitely, like I said earlier, data is becoming a bigger and bigger part of it. So collecting more data, but making more meaningful insights from that data. So that will probably involve things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. In fact, getting back to our master's course, the Master of Supply Chain Innovation, because we've set a high bar for ourselves, but with a name like Supply Chain Innovation, that means we've got to really keep on top of trends and acknowledge them in what we teach. But we have a new unit this year, compulsory for the students. That's in development at the moment, which is an artificial intelligence unit. And we're co-creating that with IBM. So again, we see that as a key area for the future.
And that's where, again, when you look at inventory management levels and your stockings, and that predictive analytics is so powerful. Because if you're a purchase order manager, you got to be able to talk to your warehouse and your sales channels, which is typically the biggest challenge for most companies, is that they're not communicating across those divisions. But if you can employ artificial intelligence or the right data analytics, predictive data analytics, where you can say, well, these are our last year's sales, let's look at some indent stock or some buffer stock, as we talked about now because of coronavirus. You can feed some of those variables into the analytics and it will spit out exactly what you should be stocking. So you can de-risk that business in many ways.
I was in Europe just before Christmas. I take a group of students to Europe every year on a study tour called Business Innovation in Europe, and we visit large companies, small companies across Europe, some startups. But in terms of the companies that we met with, the likes of Google and Facebook, their European headquarters, IBM, BMW, almost everywhere we went, everybody was talking about artificial intelligence. That was the number one trend that I recognised in Europe this year.
Wow, right. And I think I was going to ask you this question as well, which you've just sort of led me into, is how do you see Australia's knowledge or appetite for supply chain innovation versus other markets?
I think it's definitely improving. So, I've been over here 11 years in Australia, from the UK originally. When I first came here, I met a lot of people who had accents not dissimilar to mine, and particularly in the supermarkets. That's changed, so that's a good thing. I think there's definitely more focus on supply chains as a whole. I think it's been recognised that, hey, if we look outside of our own operation, there's opportunities to make more savings and more improvements. So I think there's a greater understanding there, and I think that's reflected globally as well. Supply chain people tend to get a seat at the top table now. Once upon a time, all the CEOs were from a finance background, and but now it tends to be people like Tim Cook, someone who's come from an inventory management, supply chain type background, it's being recognised that, hey, this is important to our organisation.
Well, essentially, it's a lifeblood from a stock point of view of your business, and even the cash flow point of view when you think about that. Completely. And probably 10, 20 years ago, when you walked into a supply chain role, all of them had evolved from the warehouse into a supply chain role. They understand that particular business and they understand it well, but they're not really exposed to some of these other new innovations that are coming through.
Not at all. And when I went to uni in the 90s in the UK, there was no logistics or supply chain courses then. So what tends to happen? People started their careers driving a forklift or picking in a warehouse, and they've gradually worked their way up and built on experience, and they're now the managers. But they don't necessarily have a formal qualification to that they, if they wanted to change jobs, to formalise what they've done. And that's kind of the area that we play in. We want to be able to do that and bring a formal qualification to acknowledge the skills.
And I love the way that Swinburne are really proactive in engaging industry in a really big way to actually get that balance right between the technical and the practical. So I've seen it firsthand with what you guys are doing over there, and it's really to be commended. So congratulations on that, because I think industry love working with you and partnering with you at Swinburne, and you've got a great reputation for getting real results. So it's they get benefit out of it as well. So they'll give you a case study to work on and get your students to get their teeth into it. Yeah,
look, what we do with industry is so important. We have a course advisory committee, for instance, and they feed back in what's happening in industry. At the end of the day, we want to enable students to get jobs. That's our end goal. And I think higher education is being disrupted. It's no longer about knowledge and a piece of paper. Students want skills, and the people employing students want the students to have skills. They want to be able them to hit the ground running. So if we, with our partners that I mentioned before, like Coca-Cola, Amatol, and Seva Logistics, they're giving us real projects. They're not projects that we make up. They're real problems that they've got that maybe they haven't had the time or resources to look at themselves, or maybe they just want a group of outsiders to have a look at it. So that is an invaluable experience for any student.
It's a real resource you can tap into. That's a win-win for all parties concerned.
It's the most authentic experience a student can have. That outside of the classroom, they're actually going into a workplace, working on a project with a mentor who is working in a role that maybe that's the kind of role that they want to have when they graduate.
That's right. John, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and be with us on the show today. Maybe we can do it again, maybe with a student, and ask them to get their feedback about how they found their own experience of doing the course before and after as well. So
that would be great.
Yeah, love to keep regular updates for all of you in industry. If you want to reach out and tap into the students, or if you're students themselves who want to reach out to John and look at this supply chain innovation course, definitely worth your while. Keep up to speed with this evolving beast, which is it's always fun and interesting. But thanks so much, John. Love to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you.
So.